Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Barakallahu fikum for your lectures. About the bioethics and biomedical, don't you think it's important to define a common ground of definitions of certain terms, like certain words and terms, like Dr. Tariq Ramadan just said? Because I think it's important to define some words like health, normal, pathology, psychological harm with the Islamic perspective. Why I think it's important? Because I think we are hiding in a society with the psychological harm. Like if someone isn't psychologically good, is at a malaise, like for the use of this cosmetic surgery, okay, this is okay. I don't feel good because my nose is not the way I want it to be. So I'm going, and yes, I'm suffering psychologically. It's the same for the problem of the transgender decision to change from a man to a woman or the opposite. I think we sometimes hide behind the psychological problems or pathology, and we are not really treating the cause, but treating the symptoms. So I'm asking you if in the bioethics and biomedicals field, some works has been done about that. Thank you.
So the first question is about, well, the first comment actually is about when we talked about the position of when you have, for Dr. Ghali, for when we're looking at drugs that will enhance our performance, things like memorizing or remembering or salah or whatever. And we have this thing in Islam about the value and the position of hard work in the sight of God. So for example, if you're learning Quran, فَلَهُ أَجْرًا, for the one who struggles. So if we're talking about, the reward for somebody who struggles to learn is double the one who doesn't struggle. So if we're making things easy for people, will that affect how valuable the act is in the sight of God? And for Professor Tariq, with regards to the Islamic philosophy of ecology, is our Islamic philosophy on ecology, is it to do with, do we value the environment intrinsically, or do we value it in light of human beings? So is it still anthropocentric? Because if it was still anthropocentric, does it mean that if we're not affected by the harm caused to the environment, that we then don't look after the environment? So how do we value the environment? Is it intrinsically valuable, or is it in the light of our position in the world?
This is about the, you mentioned about the preservation of nature and how important it is for our well-being. Yes, of course. Preservation of nature and how important it is for our well-being. And scientists have linked how we treat the Earth with climate change and global warming, and how, because the question was asked that what we could do in our different fields, but I'm going to ask you the question now, that what CILE is doing in terms of, pressurizing, for example, governments or companies. So this is really my question.
So, well, I really liked the way you applied your ethical approach in bioethics, and especially the last phase where you talked about casuistry. We moved from Maqasid as a theoretical concept to applying it. But I still think that you're working in a very specific context, i.e. in the West. And to what extent can this be applicable to the whole world? I mean, the concepts are perceived differently in different cultures. And let me give you an example. So I participated very recently in a workshop about social engagement. And when students and people started talking about social engagements, and I had my own ideas about it, but so it relates to terminology, because you were talking about terminology. So when they started talking about how to make institutions and people, how to convince them of the benefit of the research. And I came from Algeria with a different concept. That social engagement is simply because we have a free education, so we don't need to convince people that our research is very interesting or whatever. And social engagement for me is something else. It is, how can I share my knowledge? How can I make it accessible to society, to promote society, and to have a better society? And I shared this with them, and so we have different, the same concept, social engagement, which is gonna be, articulated or differently in different cities. So the same case is for you. I think that you are still working in a very special context. That's the Western context. So this is the question, and the following question for Professor Tariq is the same. The vision. The vision. The vision, yes, is holistic. But I feel, because I come from a different context, so I feel that you are operating in a different context, and that you are talking about a different system. For instance, yesterday when you talked about the lady who asked you about how I teach something in which I don't believe, and you told her there, you can do that, we can invest in that. And in my context, I am teaching things which are different from the things I believe, and I'm behaving differently with them. For instance, if I teach a theory in translation which is different from the things I believe, so I have the opportunity to tell my students that, well, this is what they think, and what do you think about? Can we apply it in our context? What are the other things? What are the other things we have? What are the similarities and differences? And we come with a richer vision. So I think, well, there is a problem of you are holistic, but you still operating in a very specific context. Second question to the Professor Tariq, is the translation, so is the translation of Dr. Ghali a good translation of your vision? He's making your vision, is applying it. Wallah, I really need to know if it is a good translation, because I'm doing it. I try to do the same thing in my field of specialty. Well, if this is the same, if it is a good translation, because the author and the translator are here. So if it is a good translation or not. And number 3, the last one, yes, yeah. So. How could you manage to have your discourse, which is so special and different, so different? How could you manage to have it? To have it in a hegemonic society. How could they let you do that? Yeah, you are talking differently from them, and.
Then who is that?
The other culture. The question is and let's apply to our own reality. How can we? What is the fate of our own contributions? You are asking us to contribute, but in such a hegemonic world. But I'm facing a lot of problems in getting my ideology to the other in the field of translation. So how could you manage to have your ideas, which are different and which are opposing the hegemonic discourse? How could you manage to? Is it عين الله التي ترعاك or what? That's it.
So this is a question to Tariq Ramadan. Yesterday you said, regarding my question about halal slaughter, yesterday you said you should create institutions to improve the position of the Muslim community within your society. Okay, today you said you have problems with Islamizing means, and I think first thing I thought about was Islamic banking. For example, I have the opportunity to introduce Islamic products within my society. I'm really doubting whether I should take that offer or not, because I had issues with the fact, I don't know if this is really ethical, but because you Islamize the means and the higher objective is not aligned with whatever we are discussing here. But we're talking about religious autonomy also. For me, the higher objective is if I can provide people the opportunity to buy mortgages so they can get housing, they don't need to rent, and they can protect their family, and their position within the community will improve, which will have a lot of beneficial added value for their position within the community and also for Islam. So that was, for me, the higher objective in working within that context of Islamic banking, that I provide that opportunity for people who don't have the financial resources to buy a house cash or within their family. So, and there's, when you say I have issues with Islamizing means, I totally understand that, but what should I do in this specific situation? And I know religious autonomy is really important, and I would say for myself, maybe I should go for it, but I just need your opinion about it. Like, how do you... About the fact that you have the opportunity to introduce Islamic products, but you align it with the higher objective, not the economic system, but it's beneficial for the Muslim community within my society because they can get housing, protect their family, improve their position within society. Okay, really fast, if we look at the greatest visionaries of this time, for me, Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they said, #1 threat to humanity is artificial intelligence. And that's maybe something more in your line. Are we busy with artificial intelligence? Are we doing something around that? I work for a company that is investing millions and millions into improving artificial intelligence and cognitive solutions. So they are working on it intensively to bring it in the market and to have it a real place in our society. Are we questioning artificial intelligence? Does it have a place within our community, and what is our position on it? Okay.
Okay. I have noted 4 points, and the rest for Dr. Tariq and our colleagues to elaborate upon. About the terminology and the definitions, like health, sickness, etc. I think with the technological advancements, especially in the field of medicine now, we have great problems. We have key terms in our life which make sense to our life. So when we know what health is and what disease is, and what is normal and what is abnormal, we take decisions to manage our life accordingly. And for a long time, we thought that these are stagnant definitions, clear, long-standing. And when you have challenges about these definitions, we get in panic and emotional, and you have great difficulties. Let's take the example of health and sickness. Usually health, sickness is losing health. So you can do specific functions in life, and in a moment you lose it. Then you become sick. That's it. But now with the genetic revolution, we came to know that our body, our functioning body, has a digital version, which are the genes. These are the protein-producing genes, as they call it, the enzymes, etc. We have a machine inside which are doing this. We can, by reading the genome, we can know what will happen to the body before it happens. Because we read the digital version, we look at the computer before it's printed. If we read these things in the digital version, is this person healthy or sick? This is a problem. Why would people have to do premarital genetic tests if they look perfect? Because we think maybe they are sick. Maybe their children will be sick. This has shaken our understandings of what health and sickness is. Even what's life and death. If someone is on a life support machine, his brain is not functioning anymore, what is this person? Is he living? Is he dying? Is he already dead? Every answer to these questions will determine a bunch of procedures. Should we put off the life support machines? Should we continue? Can we procure organs, etc.? This is a huge problem. Unfortunately, in Islamic bioethical literature, in the modern time, we don't have a lot of work on these big issues. By reading the collective institutions in the Muslim world, specifically the one in Kuwait and the two in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah and Mecca, you can have some very good insights, but it needs a lot of work, further work, in order to get into this. I would say, from an Islamic perspective, we have a multi-dimensional perspective. So health is not only the absence of a disease. And health is not only a medical condition. As Dr. Tariq mentioned, the spiritual aspects are extremely important. And by time now, for a specific moment in history, we thought that the link between the emotions and the body, or the spirituality and the body, is a fallacy and superstition, and it has nothing to do with science. It's not measurable. We are now moving to a different position. That there is a link. There is a link, and the spiritual power can help people overcome specific diseases which the others who do not have this power may not have, these things need a lot of discussions, but my point is that it is multidimensional, and it would differ from one question to another, from one person to another, and from one situation to another. For instance, judging person as healthy or sick and deciding which procedures to follow would completely differ, to my understanding, if this person is living in Egypt or Morocco or in a country like Qatar. Will be completely different. There are facilities here, there are no facilities there. It will differ between someone who is responsible for others, someone who is living alone, someone who has, if this person is still a child, part of the vulnerable groups as we call them or not, etc. So it differs widely because of the context. But generally speaking, we have problems. We need to redefine these concepts. We need to rediscuss them and re-revise them. Otherwise, we will have problems. We cannot approach these concepts from one single aspect. So it's not only medical, it's not only social, it's not only spiritual, it's not only religious. It's a very complex network of factors. About the drugs for enhancing capacities. Since the 70s, when we had the birth of bioethics, environmentalism, etc., we have also the phenomenon which we call medicalization. Medicalization is that we medicalize what's not medical, or what used not to be medical. I mentioned the example of marriage. Marriage is not a medical issue. Marriage is emotional. Now medicine is interfering. It says that if you want to get married, you have to consult also the physician, which would be, in the 70s, something crazy. People, when we had the modern nation state, people had great problems that the state would interfere in their marriage, and then they have to ask the approval of the state to give them certificates, etc., because this has nothing to do with the state. It's a personal issue. Now we have even the physician who will interfere. You love each other, but you are not good for each other, the physician would say. And now, the countries which have laws about premarital genetic tests, the tests are obligatory, but the results are not, in order to avoid paternalism. So X wants to marry Y, and they are not fitting for each other medically, genetically speaking. So we give them the advice not to marry, but it's an advice. If they want to get married, they can still get married. But there is a slippery slope. Some countries now, they have a fund which they give money to the people who are willing to marry. Some rich countries do this now in the Gulf. So if you are a lucky citizen of these countries, you want to get married, you get a couple of tens of thousands to help you for the costs of marriage. But now, if your medical advice is negative, you can get married, but you don't get the money. So it's coming, it will move. As we mentioned also the genetic privacy. We have law in the US, and I hear that Trump administration, Donald Trump administration, they want to change this. So for enhancing drugs, it's a medicalization. So if you want to enhance your memory, usually the right trains, the exercises, etc., which can help you. If you really have a problem, yes, you go to the doctor, etc. But if you are a normal person, you memorize like all the others. It's not a medical condition for which you take pills to memorize more. It's completely another route that you follow. What Dr. Tariq was saying in his discussion with this economist, this intelligent economist, the objectives are also in the means. We want to become better in our memory and in our intelligence. This is the objective, but the means you take is also important. You want to develop yourself, or you want to take a pill in order to become better. So now about the drugs which they will give for the lawyers in order to memorize the books. I still doubt if you memorize books, would give this you also analytical tools, how to do this. I don't know. It's such a complicated thing. So I have problem with following these methods and these means for achieving objectives, which according to my understanding, I'm still really doubting, to be honest with you, if this conclusion is the right one. But I have a serious problem up to the moment. Maybe next year when we see each other, I would have other conclusions. But no, the means are also important. Means are also important. We have what I mentioned yesterday, mujahadat al-nafs. This is struggle with yourself in order to become a better person. This is a value by itself. Now, through the medicalization, we will skip all this, and I think it can have dramatic consequences. It's not about vitamins or medical drugs. It's about you have normal capacities like the average people, but you want to get more without exerting efforts. That's it. This is what I mean. I would say you have to exert efforts because this is a means, but this is also an objective in itself. You have to work hard. We cannot bring everything back to medicine to help us in this regard. About the ethical reasoning and things I have mentioned. Yes, I'm Dutch now, but I'm Egyptian. And I'm Egyptian genetically, and I don't know what more. Yes. I am fond of the beans. This is my favorite meal, which is the favorite meal for the Egyptians. Yes. But I read Western literature on the bioethics, especially the last time, very intensively, and my position on this is that you are looking for wisdom. You are looking for wisdom, wherever it is. I think this is a good intention. She's not bad. Sometimes you make mistakes while you are doing this, but it doesn't matter. You have to. I think in the bioethical literature produced by the West, we have amazing ideas and we have amazing questions. But as I mentioned with the case of Potter, although the questions and the approaches are quite significant, but if you put God in the equation, it can reshuffle everything. If you put the hereafter in the equation, it can reshuffle everything. If you put the objectives of the lawgiver and the objectives of the individual, and that you have to widen the gap between both, it can change a lot. But this doesn't make this type of literature irrelevant or useless. Not at all. Not at all. When you have someone who says, coming from the Western tradition, saying science will not solve the problem. We have now religious scholars, Muslim religious scholars, who think otherwise, who think that science will solve the problem. We have been living in stagnancy because we are not scientifically developed. Once we do this, everything will be fine. They accommodate everything coming from science from an Islamic perspective. I mentioned the case of premarital genetic tests. Some religious scholars, prominent religious scholars, gave the fatwa, if you don't do the premarital genetic test, the marriage contract will be invalid. Why will the marriage contract will be invalid? Because marriage contract is about achieving benefits and avoiding harms for the involved people in the contract. Without doing this, people will fall in harm. So we can say because of the harm, we declare the marriage contract invalid. By bringing these questions coming from the Western literature, it helps us to broaden our understanding. We don't have to wait so many years to come to the conclusion that this is a thin approach, this is a narrow-minded understanding. We have people who have been witnessing this, who made the same mistakes, and they tell us now it is a mistake. We don't have to wait for this. We can shorten our time. So using Western literature, I find no problem whatsoever with this, as long as you are critical with it. If I'm critical to my tradition, which is Islam, in which I believe, which I live with, and I cherish too much, why not being critical also to the Islamic tradition? About the public engagement, I think this is one of the things, and social engagement, one of the things which we hardly miss in the Muslim world and Muslim communities. The religious scholars I mentioned, the publications of the institutions I mentioned, if you want to get them in your hand to read, you will have great difficulties. The first time I heard about them, I was at Leiden University. The university appointed for me one research assistant for 1 year. His task was only to give these books, to bring these books to the library. You cannot get them. I myself I traveled by plane to their places in order to get the books. They are in stores with a lot of dust, and there is no reach out to the public. Which is quite a big problem. There is understanding among many people in the field of Islamic bioethics and the field of Islamic studies in general that these things are quite specialists. So the public don't need to know about them. So I tell you cloning is unethical, and that's it. This is what you have to do. You should be busy with your own work. I do my own work, and you should only have listened to me. I think this is quite problematic. Not just because it looks paternalistic, but because I, as a specialist, I will miss a lot of insights. The feedback I get from the general people, if we may say, it helps me refine my approach and addressing my questions. So for sure, we have a problem with the public engagement. Things should be open to each other. I discussed with some religious scholars who say, and this is an example which you can find in almost all contemporary literature in the field of Islamic studies. Dealing with a religious scholar is like dealing with a physician. When you go to a physician, do you ask him, why did you prescribe this medicine for me? You trust. So as a religious scholar, I give you the recipe for the salvation in the hereafter. I said, but now we ask the physicians. Yeah. We ask them. Yeah. We check on internet. We say to them they are wrong. So this is outdated. There is no specialization outside the general public anymore. Everybody should justify their conclusions in front of the public. And you should reformulate your conclusions on the basis of the feedback. It cannot work like this. So it is a big issue. Finally, the artificial intelligence. I personally didn't work on this, on artificial intelligence, but I know, I hope in the future it will be on our agenda, and it raises, of course, very, very, very serious problems. And the advancements in the field are horrible. What we hear from the specialists, I had a fellowship in the Kennedy Institute of Ethics, and I followed the course there during this time. And one of the neurologists told us about this artificial intelligence and potentials. Some of them are quite scary, that these machines will have feelings by time. And there were experiences in Japan who are quite advanced in this regard. They had a project who had expressed feelings at the end. So they terminated the project immediately, because this means that your control on the object will be lost by time. So it is a big issue. I'm not very well equipped with information to discuss it, but it will have specific, serious ethical questions and economic as well. One of the good news is that the least profession which will be threatened by artificial intelligence is teaching. So teachers will not be very quickly replaced by robots, which is a good thing. But those who are will be quite threatened are people with very high salaries, like surgeons. They are in the risky area. They can be replaced soon. Pilots can be replaced soon. So we will see how far we can go. I think I covered my questions.
So there were some questions about, the first was environment intrinsically valuable, or because of our situation of the situation of the human beings. This, I think, was the question that you had. So what we had coming from the Quran is that environment and nature is valuable per se. Of course, it's intrinsically valuable and has to be respected per se. Understanding at the same time that everything in nature is praising God. It's in itself praising God, and we don't understand, as you know, the Shawqi was referring to the verse. So we have to take it as something which per se, it's not only because of our, and the way we are showing our respect towards Allah, towards God, is in the way we are respecting what He gave us as a gift, which is nature, which is valuable per se. You were asking about the pressure and which what we can do about. Once again, I think that you always have questions about the practical side, which is good. How do we do this? So when it comes to environment, there are many levels where we have to be involved within our respective societies. I would say first, at our individual level, is, once again, if we are serious about the environment, if we are serious about these questions, in the way we are educating our kids, in the way we are eating, there are, you know, you can't boycott everything in the name of, you know, it's about you can't do this. But you can add to what is known as being haram, and we don't drink alcohol, we don't eat pork, but there are things that I made it part of the family culture. We don't eat this. We don't. So for example, I never went with my kids to McDonald's. We don't. We don't drink Coca-Cola. We don't. So it's something which is a personal, it's a family, it's ethical. So, and the way we eat meat, not too much. The way we, for example, during Ramadan, there is a culture of Ramadan. It's prohibited in my home to have too much food in the evening. No way. It's you eat less, and in the evening you eat less. No, I'm serious.
Starve. Yeah,
Huh?
starve. Yeah, starve.
No, but it's very serious. It's very serious. It's the way you understand. It's the way you put some meaning of some of the way you practice your religion. And anything that I see which is against us, I try to make it a way of reminding. So it's in our way of life, which is very important, I would say. And then it's, as I said, within the community in which way, for example, we are talking about the halal things and what we buy as well. There are also products coming from some specific countries that we don't buy. So it's not only Israel. By the way, Israel, no, but I'm serious. I think it's a way of life. It's very awareness of what, and then it's the way we have to have institutions, as I said, when it comes to the halal meat, when it comes to the way we dress as well. It's also very important. It's very important. There are products that we have to think. So we can't, if we go, we have sometimes on internet a list of, you have to ban all this. So at the end, say, okay, what am I going to buy? You can't do this. But the symbols of targeting some of the main things, it's in fact, it's a good way of remembering. And then institutions working at different levels. You have, I mentioned in the book, because this was also something which was important. I was studying when I was writing the book, trying to get local initiatives in the States, in Canada, in Europe, of people doing good things when it comes to environment, in the way, they treat animals, in the way they are producing meat and meals. That's all this, it's important. I was questioning the fact that what is more halal than the bio products are only slaughtering the animal and saying technically it's halal, and that's it, and that we have to push this ethical question. So we might be involved with this, but once again, it's not on our own. We had lots of people in the West, or even in Muslim majority countries now, in African countries, that are involved in this. I went to Mali and I met with a woman who was in the, alter globalizer movement, alter globalization movement. I don't know if you heard about this in the 20 years ago, 10 years ago. She was a minister. She was not very much involved in religion, quite far. She didn't like this religious discourse that she was mentioning, she was listening to in Mali. But she had a project in Mali, in Bamako, about producing, indigenous foods, avoiding anything which is coming from the sodas, coming from. This was more Islamic than so many Muslim organizations in the way, and she was far from that. I said, this is it. This is the way I resist. And I think that this is a good project. This is a very important project. What is her name again? Aminata Traoré. Aminata Traoré. It's great. And now, out of our relationships, he is now considering all what we are saying from a religious viewpoint as something which is very powerful in what she's doing, because it's mobilized. So this is what we have to do wherever we are, and I think it's important. That's a good question, and it is part of potential contradictions that we may have being there. Well, that's a question that was asked from the very beginning. What are you going to do on ethics when you are based in a Gulf state and things like this? And I think that this is out of our wisdom within the whole global system, is to stick to principles and to be clear on what we are trying to do. You have to deal with the environment. Now, the way you are going to protect first, because there are priorities. The fact that you protect intellectual autonomy in the way you think, in the way you are able to, and then some of the issues. It's going to be very difficult from us to tackle the policy government about oil, but there are other things that we can do and we should do, for example, when it comes, for example, to migrant workers. And I said this from the beginning, there will be no center on ethics if we are not tackling this issue, and we have this as a field within which, and I myself was involved in this discussion with the president of the Qatar Human Rights Organization about this, about the migrant workers and being involved in this. And I never shy away from speaking about these issues. Now about the Gulf states in itself and producing, you need to have another discourse, which is a discourse on the whole region as well, which I'm doing, but not specifically towards Qatar, about the whole region, which is to be critical towards. But I think that we need to be realistic in what are our priorities and what we are trying to, in which way we are trying to work, because it's exactly the same. You know, it would be exactly the same in any institutions in the world, in any country. You have a priority that you have to be free enough to be able to speak. So I agree with you. I agree it's a question. It's a big question, is where you are and what you can say and what you can't say. And I would never hide behind the fact that, okay, you know, let us do the work, we are doing good things. No, we are facing contradictions. That's you know, and I'm the first to be aware of these contradictions. And to tell you the truth, if you would have asked me 20 years ago if I would end up being in a Gulf state, I would have said never. And in my, no, but I'm serious. I have nothing to hide about this. And this is something that I told people over there by saying, you know, I have something which is in me, it's known there, that there is a problem. And I think that I'm facing this. Now, the question is, how do you go for the work? How are you trying to get, we can do things now, and what we are doing, this awareness that we have, that this wouldn't have been possible anywhere else, with what we got as a space where we can do this. So now it's for us to know our priorities and to work without forgetting our principles. That I would say it's the way I would go for this question. Yeah, I heard about that, but there is one real question when we connect this with the environmental issues and, you know, traveling and all this. It's when it comes to Hajj, is it only that we you know, it's a duty, you have to do it. Now you can do it once, you don't have to do it 10 times, and for many reasons. It's just the environmental concern is something, and plus the money that you are putting, while people need money for other things. So you have to prioritize. Do it once, maybe 2 if you have your spiritual need, but every year. And in the way some are thinking that they are saving the year by going there once, we don't know what they do between the two. It's a problem. I think it's a problem. So we really have to connect this also to the big picture, but it's a duty at the end of the day, but we cannot disconnect this from the whole picture. But it could be another. I'm sorry, I just want to finish the questions, but it's a good one, by the way. So the holistic, it's not because it's holistic that it's not going to be specific. A holistic understanding of the problem, it's what we are trying to share. Now you have to translate this into your reality. So if you are feeling that sometimes we speak from the West because we are, that's fine, that's true. I'm not going to deny the fact that I am a Western Muslim. I'm working with the holistic. The problem for me is not the viewpoint. The problem is the worldview, the holistic approach. Is this workable in your reality? If yes, we can go ahead. If not, you have to adapt it. So the holistic approach might have within it different hierarchy or priorities. This is why you have to set this from. So don't take what we are saying as the unique viewpoint. And there is a difference between looking at the problem and the methodology with which you are trying to solve the problem. What we are trying to share here is a methodological approach, but we are not saying that the priorities should be the same, and they are not. The starting point of our exchange is to understand that our priorities are not. But it might be that out of our exchange, some of the priorities that you didn't think about could come to you as something that you have to consider, which is exactly what we also have to do with Muslim majority countries, that some are, for example, very important. And this, for example, anything which has to do with resources and what is happening, the production of oil and gas coming from the Gulf States, is also something that we have to think about from where we are in the West, in the way we deal with this. About, is this the good translation of what I think? I don't think that Dr. Ghali is trying to translate my vision. What he said also is very important, is that he's working on it. We are sharing some of the priorities and some of the understanding of the relationship between science and applied ethics and Maqasid. All this, there is an agreement on some of the big questions. Now in his field, he's working with the questions that he has, and it's not a translation of my vision.
So what is the link?
The link? So this is exactly the methodological reality. What we are trying to do is the Maqasid, the ethical input, the Maqasidi approach, and we are in the center. We all have the feeling that we have to do things differently, and we have to get the vision that how are we going to make it or to respond in a better way to the challenges of our time, coming back to our methodology and trying to reconcile and to think about the relationship between maqasid, ethics, and ahkam. I started with a vision when we were thinking about the center. Some are sharing the vision from the beginning, some are dealing with it, some are taking part of it and rejecting part of it. The last, there were two last questions very quickly about how do we manage to, in this special discourse. Let me tell you something which is important in the whole thing. I kept on repeating for years that what I am writing is sometimes more understood by people of other faiths than by Muslims themselves. Okay, they don't always get what I'm trying to say. And some, in political terms or philosophical terms, are very much against all this, all what I'm trying to, because they see some danger in the way this is said. Because, you know, in in many of the books, when I was talking about you know, counter power and the Islamic contribution, because I kept on saying from the very beginning, I don't care about the fact that you accept me. I care about the way I'm going to contribute wherever I am. So it's the added contribution and the added value of the presence. And you have to be very cautious and to be very wise with the West. The West is not a monolithical reality. You are trans and you have people who are understanding, and they are very close with within their own tradition, close to what we are trying to say. In the Christian tradition, in the Jewish tradition, even in the Jewish tradition. I'm writing a book now, again, the second volume with Edgar Morin, who is from a Jewish tradition, a philosopher, an anthropologist. And we are very close. I'm closer than him as to the principles than with many Muslims in the way they're understanding Islam. So it's not, you know, the West is this and you are counter, so you are facing media coverage, negative exposure. That's fine, that's part of life. We knew this, that it's going to happen from the very beginning. If you follow in the footsteps of the messengers, all of them, this is what you will get. It's not Salamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan, sit down and talk. It's not going to happen that way. But the point is, and this is where I urge you, wherever you are, don't confuse governance or governments and institutions and even political parties with the people and with the intellectuals. You will get lots of respect. And you will be respectful towards people who are thinking, providing, and doing. Don't talk to them the way you talk to governments or institutions or even activists. I think we have to differentiate and to be clear on this and to understand that whatever is happening, things are moving. Things are moving. So you know, when you see what is happening now in Muslim majority countries and even in the West, these thoughts, there is a movement, there is an intellectual life. And this is why we have to be. And the last thing about your housing and all this, that's a big question that you have. And once again, what you have when it comes to can we go for the mortgage? You had, of course, where are you based? Belgium. In Belgium, yeah. So you have, you know that the European Council for Research and Fatwa took a position on this by saying if you are in a non-Muslim majority country and you are in the West, you can go for the mortgage exactly for the same reasons, is that on the necessity to protect your family, to protect your kids. So you have a fatwa going that way.
From conventional banks or also from Islamic banks?
Both. Both.
The fatwa says as long as you don't have an alternative.
Yes, under necessity. I said that. There is the necessity. So if there is a necessity, if you don't have, but even today with the Islamic banking, it's very difficult to get the mortgage for a house in the private sector. It's becoming more and more, and especially it started to be very much more possible, for example, in the UK with HBKU, and now it's starting again. So it's starting. So the question is, if you are in a situation where there is necessity and there is this pressure and there is no other way for you to protect, you go for that, and it's possible. So you have a fatwa, you can do it. No, but it has nothing to do with the means here. They are acknowledging the fact that the means are not even Islamic. It's not. It's not. It's just the final thing is you are in a situation on the darura. They acknowledge that this is interest and this is it's not a problem. It is a problem, but they are. And in fact, just to give you another example, because this was something that I was reading in the 80s, which was my father, rahimahullah, when he was publishing in Muslimun. In the 60s, he took some of the fatwa coming from the scholars from India, and they are from the Hanafi school of thought, saying in a situation where the Muslims are in Dar al-Harb and they are not in the Muslim majority countries, they can go for it and all this. So they got the fatwa in the 60s to preserve and to protect their properties by using interest in this situation in South Africa. And in fact, 30 years later, it's because of this that they are today a very powerful economic force in the country, because they're protected out of this fatwa, which is coming from the Hanafi school of thought in a non-Muslim majority country and Dar al-Harb. In fact, Sheikh al-Qardawi asked me for this, just to be able to come also to add to some of the things that they were doing in the 90s and in 2000. So I would say here, it's even a bigger discussion about how do we deal with this. Because once again, the problem is it only a fatwa that we have in economic terms in non-Muslim majority countries? What is the situation or the economic impact, the global economy, on who are the more victims of the whole thing? Muslims living in the West or Muslims living in the global South? That's a big question. It's not Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam and the national economy. We are not talking about that now anymore. So when he went to Morocco and he was saying that even in Morocco you can go for this, the scholars in Morocco say, no, you don't know what is our country. Interest here is haram, so it was wrong. So it was a clash between what Sheikh al-Qardawi was saying in Morocco about this by saying it could be possible. And in fact, global economy is changing all the parameters. So I would say for this, you can understand the benefit of protecting. Exactly. That's fine. The question, which is bigger than that, is to put this question into the bigger question about our global economy today. Wallahu a'lam.
I was talking about the contemporary scholarship of Maqasid, and as you understood, Maqasid is really, really still a discipline that is really, still in its embryonic phase. And now we spend so many time writing and talking about the methodology of Maqasid, how to extract and how to, categorize, etc. But what did we do with this theory? Of course, for those who Dr. Mu'taz have mentioned that, their purpose is just to, go beyond the text, or their purpose is to, submit the text to the Hellenic philosophy or Aristotelian philosophy. For them, it's okay, not having this, not building a system or a frame of reference in Maqasid, it's okay, because this is not the purpose. The purpose is just used to Maqasid, and then you can say everything, okay, this is Maqsad. But you know, if we have built, or if we are theorizing all of these years, theories about Maqasid, how to extract, and how to categorize, and how to do it, etc., how comes that we did not build a framework according to these methodologies of extraction, these methodologies of categorization, these methodologies of defining what is higher objective, what is overall objective, what is objective in specific field, what is etc., etc. Look, my idea, and this brings me to the second point. My idea is to, you know, if you look at the methodology that was developed by those scholars, it is very rich. It is very rich, and for me, you know, you can get out of the text on several levels concerning, for example, spiritual practice, concerning practical practice, concerning, you know, theology. Those elements should be brought together, and from this you can't, you know, first of all you have to define a parameter. What is your parameter for saying what are the higher objectives? So for me personally, the parameter should be the function for which human being has created, because at the end of the day, the whole Sharia came for one end, and is to enable you to fulfill or to perform the function for your creation. So for me, this is of course, it's much more complex than this, but this should be the parameter to define whether this is the highest objective or not. Because what should be the higher objective? Without this objective, you cannot, it's impossible to perform your mission. And there is nothing higher than this. And then you can, you know, you can identify, you know, what are the higher objective, that without those you cannot perform your mission. And then you can settle like a paramedical or, you know, a pyramid of, you know, means that are all ending up in this higher objective, that are all ending up and enable you to perform your mission. And so you should develop also a philosophy of a worldview, theoretically, of what is exactly this mission that human being, this function that human being is supposed to perform. And this will help you define the higher objective and the objectives that are under those, and then the means that Sharia came with. This is the first step only. But then there is a second step also. In the concrete life, in all the areas of human action, we should also define the higher objective that should be of this area. What should be my objective as for example, an environmentalist, you know, in my field, what are for the time being the objectives of the field, and what should be the objective according to, you know, to this paradigm, or according to this frame of reference that I established theoretically. So each one in his field. And here we have another issue, and that is, like I said before, Shatibi was Ash'ari, which means that he did not give a great attention in, this is one of the reasons, of course, I don't say this is the main reason, or to, you know, the role of the universal will, or let's say the universal objective, in identifying the higher objectives. You know, because for Shatibi, like for all the Ash'aris, the universal will is just there to serve, he said this explicitly, is just there to serve the revealed will. You know, you saw in my presentation, for me it's the opposite. Well, for the Ash'ari it's the opposite. You know, Imam al-Buti in his book ضوابط المصلحة, he is defending the Ash'ari position on this to the end of his capacity, because he's an Ash'ari, and for him, you know, it's almost kufr to say that, you know, the universal will, or the revealed will, is serving the universal will, because for the Ash'ari there is no intrinsic good or intention or whatever in the universal will. So here, you know, why I say this, because we have a problem also in the way that in the sources, or the way we extract the higher objective. So the reality, or the universal will, should be also a source of identifying the higher objective. And here comes the question about the role of everybody in being a Maqasidi. Because we are talking about, should you be, Islamic scholar to be in the field of Maqasid, or, well, here, this distinction that I mentioned before, well, for me is important, because what are we talking about when you're talking about Maqasid? Is it Usul al-Maqasid, which means that you will be specialized in the methodologies and in the illah and in the qiyas and in the Usul al-Fiqh and etc., in order to define what is the methodology of Maqasid, what is the methodology of considering Maqasid in ijtihad and extracting Maqasid and categorizing, etc., etc. This is, of course, something that is specialization. But in the second part, when it comes, to in your fields, when it comes to not only, in your creative exercise, in the creative exercise of your field, when you are developing your field and when you are thinking of in the issues of your field, to do it in the frame of the Maqasid. Not only this, but also in developing even the frame of Maqasid in your field. There everybody should be Maqasidi. Even somebody in his daily life, how he looks at life, how he looks at the way he consumes, how he etc. He should be aware of Maqasid. And Maqasid should be there everywhere. I think the Prophet ﷺ says, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. I think this is a part, for me, knowing Maqasid today should be obligatory for every Muslim. Knowing Maqasid, for me, there is already a crisis in the fact that, even the scholars, when they talk about Maqasid, what are you talking about exactly? Like I give the example. Hifd al-Din for him is, preserving the religions. So we don't even know what is this, the system of Maqasid that is where it's an intersection of theology, of spirituality, of practical teaching of Islam. All the teachings of Islam comes together in this frame and becomes something practical. Something very abstract of theology, like the sifat al-ilahiyya, the divine attributes, which are, something that, in Salafi Aqidah, it's only something that you should know and believe in. But in the practice, there is nothing there. Fiqh is fiqh and Aqidah is Aqidah, and there is no any consequence whatsoever, and they talk about Tawheed al-Uluhiyya wal-Rububiyyah wal-Asma wal-Sifat, etc., very theoretically, and you should believe this and not this and this and not this. But why in practice? I don't know. Nothing is there in practice. And if you come in practice, you see it's full of shirk. Even in countries where the Salafiyya is dominating. So here Maqasid is an interplay, and here those abstract concepts become from that can be guiding human action in all its dimensions. Like I said, most of the scholars, even from Maqasid, they say that Maqasid is something that should be qat'i, immutable. And there should be a consensus about this. And I said Shatibi, this was his purpose. And Ibn Ashur, this was his purpose. But the problem is, like I said, the discipline after Shatibi and Ibn Ashur, like I said, Shatibi was the first. But now, after Shatibi and Ibn Ashur, what is the contribution? What is the added value? You have so many writings about it. What is the added value? What are the means? What are the parameters to define? And how can we come to a consensus? I think this is something that should be worked on. Right now, there is a lot of debate on what are the higher objectives. There's debate on even Maqasid. Should it be a discipline by its own, or should it not be extracted from Usul Fiqh? And here again, when coming to the distinction between Usul al-Maqasid and Fiqh al-Maqasid, then we can, for me, it should be a discipline that is within Usul al-Fiqh, if talking about Usul al-Maqasid, but talking about Fiqh al-Maqasid, no. It should be an individual and separated discipline. In CAL, and several seminars that we have in CAL, the idea was to bring together scholars of text and context. And one of the ideas, the old ideas that has been left because there are a lot of problems at this level, is that the scholars of the context or the text, when bringing the Maqasid, should work together with the scholar of context to refine and retune, because the scholars of the the text will bring you, the perspective on the religion, and the scholar of the context will bring you, the challenges in his field, etc. And this dimension that is coming from the universal perspective. And here something can be created, but the problem is, that we are far away from this for the moment. So do you have the right as a researcher to go to the text and to define maqasid? To extract maqasid. I think it depends on which type of researcher you are. Of course, like I said, extracting maqasid is something that I categorize within the field of, usul al-maqasid. And this, like I said, the contemporary scholarship on maqasid is only about this, almost only about this. Almost nobody will frame a system of maqasid, whether it is in an overall in all the fields of human action or in a specific field. So here, the part of extraction, this needs, very specialized, very specialized understanding and very specialized training to do this. No, I don't say you can't do it. I don't say you can't do it. But I think for a researcher, he should, refer to the people in the field in order to perform this work.
I was talking about the scholarship. Yeah, not at the applied level. But this way, in this way, you can fall under the direction number 2. I think it was the Dr. Tariq Ramadan, the way of thinking. Yes.
Because also, the brother, this Egyptian brother, I forgot his name, was talking about people, they were trained within a Western paradigm, and that when, exercising in their field, they were not talking about, they are producing things, but not talking about why, or not thinking about the why, and, what are they serving, and what are the purposes. Because, when you are trained in in the Western paradigm, this is not a question. The question is just to be, very brilliant and performant in your field. And there is no, there is a certain fragmentation. You will not be trained on looking at the objectives, on looking at the consequences, on looking at what is your purpose and what are you serving, or even, it's there. Like Dr. Ghali said before, it's there. All the technological features and advancements are in the service of something, of some way of viewing life, some ideological perception. It's serving something. But when you are trained in the West, you are trained as a medical doctor or environmentalist, etc. No, you are trained in a secularized way, which when studying the human body, God is not there, and the metaphysical dimension is not there. And, even the meta-ethics, it's something that will come at the margin. And the purpose is just for you to be performant. And so you may be very, 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 very religious, but you are brilliant for something that you don't know. You don't know why you are so brilliant and what you are serving, but you are brilliant, and that's enough. I think for the time being, this is what I said. For me, learning maqasid is obligatory for me, for everybody, because you were formatted. Your software is not looking. Yeah, but your training.
As a philosophical way
yeah.
of thinking.
Your training is you are not trained to think, about searching for the divine, for being in accordance with the divine will. This is and to see the divine dimension in what you are doing, and to strive for the objectives of fulfilling the function of. So I mean, the maqasid can be a part of this software. Then you will change your attitude. I know as an individual you cannot change the whole system by learning maqasid, etc. But at least your contribution, you will perceive the things differently. And I think as a community, if everybody does this, then we are having a good start already.
those who ask the questions about end-of-life care, are they still here? You still want to hear? Okay. Yes. About the end-of-life care, to combine the questions about euthanasia and switching off life support machine, etc. The main problem which came with medical technologies, these medical technologies helped us to save the lives of people, but they have changed our understanding of death. Death used to be a moment, a sudden death. You die when your moment comes and that's it. Now it is a process, it's not a moment. And the longer the process becomes, the more difficult decisions you will have. If I die in a second, I would not have time to discuss my options. But if this death will take days and take weeks and maybe take years now, then you will have questions. I don't think it is the good option to say, no, because we have now so many difficulties, we reject this technology. I don't think so, because it's life-saving technology, so it is important. One issue about life support machine, switching off the life support machine, and I don't want to get into so many philosophical discussions to come to the bottom and to give you practical guidelines. Now, at the moment, the overwhelming majority of Muslim religious scholars, they accept switching off the life support machine for people diagnosed with brain death. Brain death. Whether they recognize brain death as death or not. So for instance, the Islamic institution in Mecca, they don't accept brain death as death, but they accept switching off life support machine if someone is diagnosed with death. Why? Yes. Also, they disagree about is it stem brain death or is it whole brain death? We have the American and the British, and the also there is a bit disagreement with them. But I think now the whole brain dysfunction, not just the stem brain. But why do they accept switching off the life support machine, even if the person is not recognized as dead person? Medical treatment, as you have here, I think the last 2 days, medical treatment is part of our natural instinct. When you are sick, naturally you look for the treatment. Like when you are hungry, I don't have to give you a fatwa that you have to go to have lunch. You do it. So medical treatment is part of our natural inclinations.
But now they need, yes?
Yes. Unless you have very disturbing people like us who will keep you from doing these call from your instinct to go and eat. So medical treatment is part of the nature, is not part of a religious obligation. You are not obliged to do medical treatment unless this will put your life in danger or others, etc. So if we take medical treatment as a neutral act, something of an option, you don't have to. So, and you categorize life support machine as medical treatment, then in principle you don't have to. You say to me, but it is life-saving. It's not normal medical treatment, it's life-saving. The question, is it life-saving? Will this person who is diagnosed with brain death will take this medical treatment, if we consider it medical treatment, to restore normal life? The physicians would say never. This person will never. So usually I take medical treatment to regain my normal situation. So I cannot walk, I make a surgery in order to walk, whatever. This will not happen. So this person will never come back to a normal life. So actually the person, some religious scholars say, even if we say he's not dead, but he's in the dying process. استدبر الحياة واستقبل الموت. So he is leaving life and moving towards death, which we call al-ihtidar, the dying process. Prolonging the dying process is not a good thing for the person. So someone who is on his way to this and we just drag him, not to bring him back to life, but just to prolong this is not a good thing. That's why these religious scholars agree more or less on switching off the life support machine in such cases. Close to this, but not have the same degree of agreement, is futile treatment. someone in a vegetative state, etc., but the function is still braining. There is no point from a medical perspective to continue with medical treatment. Also, a great number of religious scholars would accept this, but not the same level like those who are diagnosed with brain death. About euthanasia. Active euthanasia. I give an injection to someone to put an end to his or her life at the request of the person, with my consent as a physician. I am not aware of any religious scholar, Sunni or Shia, who accepted this from an ethical perspective. Why? Because the one who gave us life is the one who can decide about the end of our life. So we cannot take decisions about the end of our life. And there are many other theological arguments about this, like this is against the argument of the right to die. There are other questions about pointless suffering. Suffering is not pointless from an Islamic perspective, etc., etc. So active euthanasia, to my mind personally, and to all the people I read about, there is no question about this. The main dilemma, I'm a physician in a non-Muslim country. They legalized euthanasia. I have a patient who came to me and he said, I want to do it. What should I do as a physician? If I'm not convinced that it is, if I am convinced that it is unethical act. The same question about abortion, the same question about the cosmetic surgeries, which can be problematic, etc. Now my position is not patient, because patient is in a vulnerable situation, can be protected by law, but you are now a physician. You are the one who is supposed to help these people. What should they do? I say there are different levels. There are different levels in this. First of all, you need to resort to the principle of conscientious objection. As professionals, especially physicians, we always have the right, at least in theory, to say, I cannot do this because I have conscientious objection, whether this has religious basis or not, but you can do it. I know in reality, it's not like in theory. So if I'm a physician and I'm in a group who are responsible for doing abortions, and all the time I say, no, I cannot do this because I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, yes, you are protected by law, but you can have great problems. They can complain that you do much less than the others because of religious extremism, and use it as a pretext not to work hard. You can have a boss who has problems with Muslims or with foreigners in general, people who do not belong to the same ethnic group, will give you bad grading and bad evaluation by the end of the year. You may lose your job. A lot of things can be. These are the things of balancing. You have a bunch of factors you need to balance between them. I would say having physicians, having lawyers, having engineers within the Muslim community in countries where Muslims are majority is a necessity. We cannot work without having people in these positions. Not just because as a Muslim when I take a Muslim lawyer or whatever, but also to have a weight, to have an intellectual weight in the society, so that when we become angry as a Muslim community, people will take care about that we are angry. But if we are all working on social benefits coming from the country, nobody will care about you. So to have a weight, it is a necessary. And against this, you make the other balances. I have an ethical conviction which must be protected. The bottom level, my conviction does not get shaken. So it's not because the hospital is asking this to me, then I say, okay, it's no problem, and this is how it goes. Well, no. So my conviction, and I would say those who work with me, those who live with me in the country, should know at the epistemological, intellectual level, I have a problem, and I have to be able to explain why I have a problem about this. Maybe you can convince the others, whatever. But this is at the intellectual, epistemological, social debate in newspapers, whatever. At the practical level, yes, you have much more options than at the intellectual level. So I would say for some physicians, if you are in a hospital and you have the ex-manager, you would have much more options than another physician who have the Y manager. Person who believes in cultural diversity, who would very much support the minorities, etc. You have much more options. You cannot say, no, because there is the system, I will do it. No, then you have to use the maximum that you can use. If you are in a country which had terroristic attacks and I don't know what, and people are looking for anybody to fire to show how much they are supporting the country, you have to take care of these issues. So there is a complex of decisions when it comes to euthanasia, when it comes to abortion, when it comes to some specific cosmetic surgeries, doing IVF for lesbians or for homosexuals, etc. etc. There are things, but at the bottom level, convictions shouldn't change because we are in a different context. The last thing to say about how can we debate with the globe, with people on earth, if we speak the religious language. If we speak the religious language. In bioethics, we speak about public morality and particular morality. What do they mean? Public morality is rationality. Once you use rational arguments, you speak for everybody. And a particular morality for locals, communities, and religion is a particular morality. I have a serious problem with this, and I speak with this in my discussions and the conferences with my colleagues. If I am a Muslim and you don't care about the hereafter, is what you speak about public morality? It's not public morality, because you don't take care of millions and billions of people who find the hereafter very important. So this is not public morality. You think you speak public morality, but it is not. So I think to divide the discourse into public and to particular morality is quite problematic. Rationality is used by everybody, is not only by those used by those who are not religious. So I don't have to be agnostic or atheist to fall into the public morality. No. I think public morality can only come by conversation. I come from a Muslim background, I say my own perspective. You come from a Christian, you say your perspective. From atheistic or humanistic perspective, you come to your perspective. And as we know now, there are principles on which we all agree. So in principle, don't kill. In principle, don't lie. In principle, there are many things on which we can agree as principles. When it comes to the application, which they call specification process, even in mainstream bioethics, non-religious bioethics, they give big space for differences based on individual or social or cultural or religious convictions. Wallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa ahkam. Thank you.